Synthetic a priori knowledge. Immanuel Kant, one of the most influential philosophers in history, revolutionized the way we think about knowledge with his theory of synthetic a priori knowledge. In this video, we will delve into what it means for something to be synthetic a priori, how it relates to our experience, and how it shapes our understanding of reality. Get ready to have your mind blown as we uncover the secrets of synthetic a priori knowledge. What is synthetic a priori knowledge? In order to understand synthetic a priori knowledge, we must first break down these two terms, synthetic and a priori. Once we understand these concepts individually, we can see how they combine to form a revolutionary idea. Let's start with synthetic. In philosophy, synthetic refers to statements or knowledge that are about particular things and can be tested through experience. For example, the claim that this apple is red is a synthetic statement because it is about a specific thing, this apple, and it can be verified through our senses. We can look at the apple and determine whether it is indeed red. On the other hand, an analytic statement is one that is true by definition or logic. For example, the claim that all bachelors are unmarried is an analytic statement because it is not about any particular thing. It is a statement about the meaning of the word bachelor. Whether it is true or false does not depend on our experience or observation. Instead, it is a logical truth that can be derived from the definition of the word. Now let's move on to the term a priori. In philosophy, a priori means prior to or independent of experience. A priori knowledge is knowledge that we have before or apart from any experience. For example, the statement that all bachelors are unmarried is a priori because it is a logical truth that does not depend on our experience. We can understand this statement and determine its truth without needing to experience anything. Our knowledge of the laws of logic and mathematics is also a priori. These laws are necessary, truths that are true in all possible worlds. They are not based on our experience, but rather they are the foundation of our ability to reason and make inferences. Now that we understand the terms synthetic and a priori, we can put them together to get a definition of synthetic a priori knowledge. Synthetic a priori knowledge is knowledge that is both synthetic and a priori. That is, it is knowledge that is about particular things and can be tested through experience, but which is not based on experience. It is knowledge that we have prior to or independent of experience. This may seem like a bit of a paradox. How can we have knowledge about something that we have never experienced? But this is exactly what Kant argued that we do. According to Kant, we have synthetic a priori knowledge of the nature of space, time, and causality. These are not things that we can experience directly. Space, time, and causality are the categories of our minds through which we experience and understand the world. Therefore, we have synthetic a priori knowledge of them. Kant's transcendental deduction, Kant's theory of synthetic a priori knowledge, is known as his transcendental deduction. In his book, The Critique of Pure Reason, Kant argues that there are certain limits to what we can know. We cannot know things as they are in themselves, but only as they appear to us. This is because our minds impose certain structures on the raw data of experience, which Kant calls the phenomenal world. These structures are the categories of understanding, which include space, time, and causality. Through these categories, we organize and make sense of our experiences. But this also means that we cannot know the noumenal world, the thing in itself. This is because the thing in itself is beyond the reach of our senses and our understanding. We can only know things as they appear to us in the phenomenal world. One of the key features of Kant's transcendental deduction is the concept of the transcendental unity of apperception. This refers to the fact that all our experiences are unified in the mind under a single subject. The subject, I think, therefore I am, is the unifying principle of all our experiences. It is the transcendental unity that makes it possible for us to have a continuous and coherent experience of the world. Without this unity, our experiences would be a chaotic and meaningless jumble. How synthetic a priori knowledge relates to experience. Now that we have established what synthetic a priori knowledge is, it is important to understand how it relates to our experience. The concept of synthetic a priori knowledge is one of Immanuel Kant's most revolutionary contributions to philosophy, forming the foundation of his critique of pure reason and his entire epistemology. It was his answer to a fundamental question: how is it possible to have knowledge that is both universally true and yet also extends our understanding of the world? To grasp the idea, we first need to understand Kant's classification of judgments. Analytic judgments. These are statements where the predicate is already contained in the subject. They are true by definition and do not add new information. For example, all bachelors are unmarried men. Priori synthetic judgments. These are statements where the predicate adds something new to the subject. It is not contained in its definition. For example, the cat is on the mat. This tells us something we could not know simply by analyzing the concept of cat. It requires observation. Traditionally, philosophers thought such judgments were a posteriori known through experience, a priori knowledge that is independent of sensory experience. It is universal and necessary, like mathematical truths or principles of logic. A posteriori knowledge derived from sensory experience. It is contingent and could be otherwise. Kant's groundbreaking claim was that synthetic a priori judgments exist, statements that extend our knowledge by adding new information, synthetic, but which are still known independently of particular experiences a priori. This was a radical departure from earlier thought because it meant that certain fundamental truths about the world could be both informative and necessarily true, without being derived from observation. Mathematical propositions like 7 plus 5 equals 12. This is not analytic, because 12 is not contained in the concepts 7, 5, or addition alone. It requires the mental construction of the sum. Yet, it is universally true and does not depend on empirical verification. Principles of natural science, such as every event has a cause. We cannot deduce this from pure logic alone, synthetic, but we also do not derive it from limited observation. It is a necessary framework for making sense of any experience a priori. Geometrical truths like the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. This is not based on measuring every possible pair of points, but is grounded in the structure of our spatial intuition. Kant argued that these judgments are possible because the human mind is not a passive recipient of sensory data. It actively shapes experience through a priori forms of intuition, space and time, and categories of the understanding, such as causality, unity, plurality, etc. In other words, our mind contributes necessary structures that make experience possible in the first place, and synthetic a priori truths describe those structures. The discovery of synthetic a priori knowledge allowed Kant to bridge the gap between rationalism, which emphasized reason, and a priori truths, and empiricism, which emphasized experience and observation. It explained how mathematics and pure natural science are possible, and how they can be both necessary and applicable to the real world. Ultimately, Kant's concept of synthetic a priori knowledge reshaped philosophy by showing that the limits and structure of human cognition determine what we can know. We do not just discover the laws of nature, we help to form the very framework in which nature can appear to us. This insight would influence not only philosophy, but also science, epistemology, and modern conceptions of the mind. The idea of synthetic a priori knowledge is one of the most groundbreaking innovations in Kant's philosophy and the central key to his critique of pure reason. It was his solution to an age-old philosophical problem. How can we have knowledge that is both necessarily true and universally valid, yet also informative about the world? Kant challenged this assumption by arguing that there exists a unique type of judgment, synthetic a priori, that is both universally necessary and thus independent of specific experiences, and expands our understanding by adding new, non-trivial content. Analytic judgments. The predicate is contained in this subject. This simply unpack a definition. Example: all triangles have 3 sides. This is true by definition and adds nothing new to the concept of triangle. Synthetic judgments. The predicate is not contained in the subject. It adds something new. Example: the apple is red. This cannot be known by analyzing the concept apple. It requires experience.